I don't know if you're ever going to have the stars like align better than what the Chiefs have this year from a division standpoint. Find me a weakness in this offense that they're not going to be able to overcome. They're a very complete roster. I don't like how underrated the Bengals are heading into the year. That kind of scares me. I am a believer in the Jets. If I had to guess right now, I'd say the Bills would probably be a divisional round exit. Until Tua wins a playoff game and a meaningful big game like that, I'm always going to be a foot half out.
In this video, I have a great conversation with Garrett from Football Analysis on the state of the AFC as the Chiefs eye a potential three-peat this season. We look at most of the contenders from KC's conference and see who, if anyone at all, could be standing in the Chiefs' way. So let's get into it. But first, how about those? What's up, everybody? I'm here with Garrett of Football Analysis. I found him during the draft. He's got a big YouTube channel. 138,000 subs, so congrats on crossing the 100K mark. I'm not sure when you did that, but that is a very accomplished feat. I just feel like you're not a hot take guy. I can tell you do your homework, you study, and I can tell when I'm watching your stuff, you're a film guy, you're really embedded into the draft, and I feel like you're very aware of just the NFL in general. So that's why I wanted to, in this video, just talk specifically AFC, how that's shaping up, based on offseason moves, the draft, and who you think could be the biggest threats to stopping the Chiefs on their quest to the three-peat. Obviously, it could be an NFC team if it happened to be in the Super Bowl. And I think you're a Vikings fan as well. My editor is a Vikings fan. But yeah, would love to chat through that. And how are you doing first off, Garrett, today?
I'm good. I appreciate you having me on. Appreciate all the kind words. I am... unfortunately, a Vikings fan at times. There's been some positive times throughout the years. Of course, Justin Jefferson's a pretty big positive, but there's been a lot of negatives. But I'm excited to get on and talk about the Chiefs, and let's go ahead and dive in.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. Well, what are your thoughts on? We can just go right there. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs and their offseason moves so far? I kind of given my thoughts 18,000 different ways on this channel, so any thoughts you have would be a welcomed change.
Yeah, so the thing is normally we haven't had a back-to-back champion in 20 years, but with normal defending champions, it's okay, how can they repeat? How can they, get back to the mountaintop? But normally they have a piece or two, lost, whether it's a big coaching change, whether it's, a coordinator that's going to be the next big thing, or maybe even a big offensive weapon that wanted out, or whatever the case may be. But you look at the roster change from Kansas City from 23 to 24, outside of L'Jarius Sneed, which I don't want to undersell how good of a player he is, there's not really a lot that changed from last year to this year. The coaching staff mostly stayed. Steve Spagnuolo, I think, is one of the most underrated defensive coordinators ever, not just in this era, but ever. I mean, he's a 4-time champion defensive coordinator. The defense, again, outside of L'Jarius, stayed pretty much the same. I know Willie Gay went to New Orleans, but I do think Leo Chanel will step up. And I really, really like what Kansas City has heading into the 2024 season. I don't know, even if you are the biggest Chiefs hater, which, as we know, they've acquired some haters over the past few years, I don't know how you can't acknowledge at least that they're going to be a great team this year.
Yeah, it's interesting you noted the Chiefs coaching staff, because that sometimes gets lost. They've basically been able to retain like everybody you could think of. Their DB coach, Dave Merritt, D-line coach, Joe Cullen, Spags is back, obviously. Andy Reid and GM Brett Veach both got extensions. Their president, Mark Donovan, got an extension. So I feel like that's an underrated thing. Like when you look at the Eagles, they didn't win, obviously, Super Bowl 57, thank God. But they lost their OC and their DC all in one offseason. And then that's a lot of turnover. So the Chiefs have basically retained everybody. Matt Nagy's back. So that is I think that's a big important factor not to be lost on the Chiefs in the quest to the three-peat. With that being said, you got thoughts on offensive side of the ball? They obviously struggled greatly at times, specifically with drops. Jawan Taylor then also led the league in penalties, which was unfortunate, but I think he shaped up to be a bit more of who I think he can be next year with him having to adapt his play style. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs' offensive moves so far and how that's got them looking?
Yeah, so what's also, again, another thing that I feel like is just not, mentioned enough, because obviously, from the mainstream media, you get a lot of, Mahomes 3-5, Travis Kelce, of course, and, everything off the field there. And then Andy Reid. There's not a lot discussed about the Chiefs actually improved on the offensive side of the ball. And like you said, they were a team that struggled at times last year, whether it was the big drop from MVS against the Eagles on Monday night, whether it was the Kadarius Toney saga with the offsides penalty against Buffalo, or even the I want to say it was Kadarius in week 1 when Brian Branch had the pick 6 against the Lions. I mean, those are 3 big games right there. And we're talking about a team that finished 15th in points per game last year, that at times, and I mean, even you would acknowledge this, whether it was Christmas Day against the Raiders or whatever game you want to choose, there were times last year where the Chiefs looked about as far from a Super Bowl champion team offensively as you could look. And the fact that they were able to bring in Xavier Worthy in the draft, who complements very well with Patrick Mahomes' skill set as a quarterback, and Marquise Brown, and the fact that they're still going to have Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce be able to play underneath while having a good offensive line with Isaiah Pacheco in the backfield, outside of left tackle, which I think they will figure out, and like you mentioned with Jawan, find me a weakness in this offense that they're not going to be able to overcome. And that's where I stand with them entering 2024. They're complete. They're a very complete roster.
Yeah, I think the biggest question I just have is the Rashee Rice suspension, which a couple have even recently said, Jeremy Fowler in particular, very recently said, hey, this legal process could still play out at the start of the season, and that means no suspension possibly till 2025. As a Chiefs fan, that would be preferred as they're chasing the three-peat, but I'm also of the mindset of, hey, if you're going to go out and do stuff like that, even if it's unintentionally, he didn't mean to wreck his car, but if you're going to go do that, you got to face the consequences for your actions. So I think a suspension is warranted. But if a Rice suspension doesn't happen this year, meaning they've got Rice all season, Worthy, Hollywood, you've got Kelce, they drafted Jared Wiley, who led all tight ends and touchdowns, I believe, in college football last year. It's a very intriguing offense. I don't know if they'll get back to like 2018, like 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, burning everybody every single play, because they will for sure play the Chiefs too high. They'll try to take away the deep ball no matter what. But I am very intrigued to see at least the scales tip for the Chiefs a little bit more even. Like last year, the defense had to carry, and there were some key games that you're not winning without Harrison Butker kicking field goals, and then you're not winning without the defense kind of holding it down. So yeah, I'm definitely intrigued, to say the least. With that being said, a lot of other teams made some moves this year, this offseason, and you already had, even last season, some teams that were very tough opponents for the Chiefs. I would be curious to know your thoughts on maybe top 3, top 5 contenders, and we could kind of go team by team if you want, or you could give like an overview and then we could go into it. I have my own thoughts too, but as the Chiefs chase the three-peat, who are some of the teams you're like, hey, in the AFC, we need to be watching out for these guys?
Yeah, so I'd like to start with the Ravens, the team that they played in the AFC Championship game, the last line of defense, if you will, before they, got to the big game. And with Baltimore, I don't know how you look at their roster or their situation and think that that 2023 wasn't going to be the best year in a 4 or 5 year span that they were going to have. Now, I know Mark Andrews got hurt midway through the year, but I mean, that defense they had, I truly think that if they win the Super Bowl last year, I really think that defense is borderline 2015 Broncos conversation, borderline 2013 Seahawks conversation, because that defense led the league in sacks, they led the league in turnovers, and there was another big, I think it might have been fewest yards. I think they had the trifecta. It was like sacks, or maybe not sacks, yards, and turnovers. And I mean, they were beating the hell out of teams. And for as good of a year as CJ Stroud had last year, which we'll get to the Texans in a minute, but they held them to 3 points in the divisional round of the playoffs because their only touchdown was a punt return. So for the Ravens this year, or entering this year, I don't know how they don't at minimum take a step back, while the Chiefs, like we said, kind of took a step forward this offseason.
The Ravens AFC Championship game was the most nervous I've been for a Chiefs game in a long time. You don't get that W without Snead punching that ball out, without Lamar doing sometimes Lamar things. I mean, he's throwing into triple coverage. I didn't understand that, but we'll take the interception in the end zone. That was probably the biggest. I was more nervous for that than the Super Bowl for sure. I was more nervous for that than the Bills, than the Dolphins. But I still think they're going to be right up there in the conversation. You mentioned like a little bit of a step back, but I mean, they'll be right up there, I would assume, in the top of the AFC. What are your thoughts on, I'm just saying the next team for you. What are your thoughts on the Texans since you brought them up? They are a team there's like two thoughts here. Stroud has a year of film on him now, but I feel like they've made some really good acquisitions on top of already having a good roster, and you're able to kind of stack it up with Stroud on his rookie deal. How are you feeling about the Texans heading into this season?
Yeah, so one I actually forgot to mention this part. I had it in my head. I forgot to say it. The Ravens also lost. They lost Patrick Queen. They lost Jadeveon Clowney, and they lost Geno Hill. So they lost 3 starters from the defense, and then they lost their previous defensive coordinator, and 3 position coaches became coordinators as well. So right there, that was the part that I forgot to mention. That's a tremendous amount of turnover in one offseason. But for the Texans, the thing with the Texans is I am reasonably buying in. Now, I did make a video a couple of months ago that said the Houston Texans hype train needs to slow down. And basically the reasoning behind that was there were a lot of people, and I get it, we live in a very reactionary world, but there were a lot of people immediately after the Stephon Diggs trade that, let's toss everything out the window and let's go ahead and we're not going to play 18 regular season or 17 regular season games, 18 weeks. We're not going to play the wild card or divisional. Let's just skip to Arrowhead Stadium or Arrowhead Field, whichever it is, Arrowhead, and we're going to play Texans Chiefs AFC Championship game. So that was, let's slow that down a little bit. But I like CJ Stroud a lot. There were several times on last year where he was making veteran plays. There's several examples throughout Stroud's rookie year where he would hold a safety specifically so he could hit a backside slant, and it was. The plays like that are not normal for a rookie drafted with, the number 2 overall pick on a team that's supposed to be bad or that's supposed to be rebuilding. So while I am, for the Texans rebuild, and while I think they're going to be improved, is they also brought in guys like Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry and Azeez Al-Shaair in free agency, and then of course traded for Stephon Diggs. Is that enough to, go into Arrowhead with the season on the line? Personally, I have a very complicated strategy here in terms of, choosing playoff games. I don't bet against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, so I wouldn't think so, but they're going to be a very tough team to beat.
Outside of the Ravens, who would you put next? Like if it's not the Texans, are you going to go Jets with Aaron Rodgers? You buying that? You going to go Bills? Where do you want to go next as far as AFC contenders go?
I would probably, I'll be honest, I don't like how underrated the Bengals are heading into the year. That kind of scares me. That whenever I just feel like whenever Joe Burrow's counted out, it's kind of like, the write it down, like I'm going to take it personal, and then we're going to see several months later, like, oh crap, we should not have forgot about Joe Burrow. And I feel like that's kind of where we are at this point entering the year. The Bengals are still going to be a very good team. I know they lost a couple of guys in free agency. They lost Chidobe Awuzie, who signed with the Titans, and they also lost DJ Reader, who is now a member of the Lions. He's certainly not going to be easy to replace, but the Bengals are still going to be a very, very good team. And you mentioned the Jets. Now, I am a believer in the Jets. I don't think their schedule is, it's hard. They have difficult games, but I don't think it's incredibly bad to the point where, they're going to be fighting for every game. And like we said with Burrow, obviously with a year of injury with the 4 snaps from Rodgers, people kind of discredit where Rodgers is right now. I see people say that he's the 15th or 16th best quarterback in the league right now, and I'm kind of like, what are we basing this off of? A 2022 season where 2022 season where he was throwing to a rookie Christian Watson or a rookie Romeo Doubs or Alan Lazard or Robert Tonyan. The Jets and Bengals are going to be very, very tough this year if they stay healthy.
Yeah, I hadn't mentioned them yet, but I definitely say the Bengals are always a tough fight, especially with a healthy Burrow. I am a little curious, with the injury he sustained and the surgery he had, how is he going to look, and will he be able to hold up for the season? If he does, I always think they're a tough fight. The Chiefs have played them, and every matchup, I think, has been 3-point games. And then both of the AFC championship games against the Bengals were 3 points. It was a tragic collapse in 2022, I believe it was. I was at that game when Mahomes played his worst half of football ever. 3-point game, and then it was still a 3-point game last AFC Championship matchup against the Bengals, and the late push, personal foul, gave the Chiefs 15 extra. They were able to kick it and get it done, but I will never count the Bengals out as long as Joe Burrow's healthy. And even with that being said, Browning played pretty freaking good last year himself.
He did, and that's they're a very, very good team, and it's tough that you were at Burrowhead when they lost, but no, it's I'm sure that had to be annoying very quickly for Chiefs fans too. I'm sure they had the everything done with that as soon as they heard that for the first time. But no, also I do want to ask, how do you feel about the Bills? Is it 3 straight wins in the playoffs? Are you guys like, little brother, or how does that as a Chiefs fan?
Hey, before we get further into this interview, did want to let you guys know an awesome way to support the channel, and actually Brandon Perna as well, is to buy some HBTC coffee of Benchwarmer Brew. It's a very smooth medium roast with origin notes of Mexico and Ethiopia. It's also a way to spite Brandon Perna. It's his company, yes, but the more bags of this coffee we sell, the more he realizes that the Chiefs are going to forever live rent-free in his head. So to get a bag of your own coffee, go to coffee.hbtchiefs.com or click the link in the description down below.
I personally don't really mind the Bills and their fans. They're very passionate. Obviously, Mahomes shared in a podcast, it was like 50,000 middle fingers as they were walking into the Bills stadium as they were on the road for the first time in Mahomes' career for the playoffs. But I have a lot of respect for the Bills. I actually like Josh Allen. I said, hey, if Patrick Mahomes didn't exist, Josh Allen on the Chiefs would be very fun. I think I commented that on one of your tweets even. I don't mind the Bills at all. I will say, like, it helps also at the fact that the Chiefs have beat them 3 or 4 times in the playoffs in the Mahomes-Allen era. I am curious your thoughts on the Bills, though, with some of the moves they had to make. They had to cut some people to get under the cap, and then Stephon Diggs is gone, and they got Keon Coleman was a guy that they drafted, and then I'm trying to remember who they got in free agency. Oh, MVS. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. Like, I personally, I'm never going to count the Bills out, and as long as I have Josh Allen, I think they'll always be in it. I do feel like they're in a little bit of a refresh, and I have seen some people say, nah, the Bills are still going to be just as dangerous. I need to see it. I think they take a small step back. But what are your thoughts on the Bills?
So I think what the Bills are going through right now, I'd call it a little bit of a transition phase. And I think we've slowly start to have seen that with the Chiefs, whether it was, Tyreek Hill going to the Dolphins or even this offseason with L'Jarius. I mean, the reality is you cannot pay everybody. And the league is a business for a reason. And the Bills went all in 2021, 22, and 23. And whenever you have, both safeties over 30 and Poyer and Hyde, and then you have Diggs, who's now 30 years old, and a guy that's, the locker room and all that is brought up seemingly every time with Diggs. And then you also have, Gabe Davis looking to get paid, who I am not the biggest fan of, and I've been pretty vocal that I don't think Gabe Davis is all that good of a receiver. So whenever you have all of these factors and you have all of these, 29, 30, 31-year-olds getting paid anywhere from 15 to 20, in Diggs' case, $31 million a year, you're going to have to reset the roster. And I know we don't want to have that conversation yet, but there's going to be a time where the Chiefs 2022 draft class, when it's time to pay, every player from that class, that's going to happen. But the Bills, I think they'll still be anywhere from 9 to 10, maybe even 11 wins this year. 11 might be a stretch. But I don't think their roster is improved from 23 to 24, especially from a weaponry standpoint. And I know Keon Coleman he's already been electric in press conference, and he's probably going to be a very good player, but I don't think they're a better football team from last year to this year. Now, I think they will be in 2025, a better team than they were in 2023, but for this year specifically, I think they're going to be at maximum a divisional round exit, maybe if the AFC seedings play in their favor, maybe a conference championship exit. But if I had to guess right now, I'd say the Bills would probably be a divisional round exit.
I knew things with Diggs weren't the best, but I still was surprised when he got traded.
Absolutely.
That dead cap it's like 30 something million. I mean, it's bad. So I was definitely surprised that happened. But the Bills are always a fun, good fight. I always enjoy those matchups. I feel like the Bills sometimes, or more times than not, they'll get the Chiefs in the regular season, but thank God the Chiefs, they normally get them when it matters later on, which has always been sweet. Very intrigued to see how the Bills pan out this year. What about a couple other teams that were playoff teams in the AFC? You've got the Dolphins, who are intriguing, especially their high-powered offense, but then you've got the Browns as well. So let's stay with the Dolphins for a second. And what are your thoughts on them and how they are faring after their offseason?
Man, the Dolphins, the thing is I want them to be good so bad. I'm a huge fan of head coach Mike McDaniel and what he brings every year. I mean, Mike McDaniel, the thing is every year, the first 2 weeks, I pay particular attention to what they do, because McDaniel is like, I really think he's a football genius in the sense of how he schemes plays up. And there was a play last year that was referred to as the cheat motion that everybody was doing by like week 8 or week 9. And it was a play where Tyreek would start inside and then motion out. So I don't, you can't see my hands, but he would motion out so that he could basically be, close to full speed by the time he got past the line of scrimmage when the ball was snapped. But unfortunately, it's like the Dolphins, it's like they start the marathon at a Tyreek Hill full sprint, and then by the end of the season, it's like they're, at a walking pace. And they're a very frustrating team in that sense. They only put up 40 total points in their final 3 games last year, which were against all playoff teams. They played the Ravens in week 17, the Bills for the AFC East title in week 18, and then obviously, the wild card round against the Chiefs, which we all know how that ended. But until Tua wins a playoff game and a meaningful big game like that, I'm always going to be a foot half out, or I'm always going to be a glass half empty approach with this team, because we haven't seen it yet outside of spurts in the regular season, or outside of a game here or a game there. Now with the Browns, I think the Browns are one of the bigger dark horses in the AFC. I think their defense could be one of the best in all of football. They have playmakers at every level, led, of course, by Myles Garrett. Their secondary is phenomenal. They have 3 great players at Denzel Ward, Newsome, and then Martin Emerson. They're going to be a pain for anybody to play as long as their offense is adequate, and as long as they don't throw games away. The Browns are going to be a tough team to beat for anybody.
Yeah, the Browns, Flacco was slinging it last year, and their defense was nice. I guess I'll be curious to see with them how Deshaun Watson does. Is his injury fine? That contract is atrocious, but I feel like they've built some pieces around him, and they're definitely on the list of like teams that. I was curious how they would do by the end of it with Flacco, like how they were going to go in the postseason, and thought they might make it a little bit further than they did. But back to the Dolphins. I'm glad the Chiefs won that game. It was very sweet to beat Tyreek at Arrowhead after all was said and done. Before I move on, are you team pay Tua? Where are you standing on that? I feel like it's a bit weird.
So, oh man, that's the thing is if I were the GM, this is so, I just want to preface this, that this is so easy for me to say, because I can, I don't have to look at players every day as they come in the facility and all of that, which obviously weighs on a person's mind and thought process. But if I would honestly rather the Dolphins just trade Tyreek, trade everybody that's kind of like north of 30 years old, just because they're going to go all in. And it's like, for what? They signed Calais Campbell. They have Teron Armstead at tackle. Both guys are 33 years old or older. And it's, kind of like at the end of the day, for what? Now, I have a lot of concerns with Tua moving forward. Is he ever going to be a top 6 or top 7 player? I don't think so. And the funny thing is if you say this to Dolphins fans, I promise they'll be the first to say that, well, Tua led the league in passing yards last year and finished top 5 in passing touchdowns. But at the end of the day, where is it getting you? They flame out every year, and I think it's going to be the same thing this year. So if I were the GM, I would look to honestly just try and completely rebuild. But what I think is going to happen is I think they're going to pay him, because they're not really going to have a choice. You have all these guys that are 28, 29, 30 plus that aren't going to be in for a rebuild, nor would I blame them. So I think at the end of the day, Tua is going to get probably close to a $200 million contract, if not more.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting situation to watch. And you said, hey, start trading some of these guys. That'd be interesting if Tyreek gets traded again. Maybe not this year, but next year or whatever. I know he wants a new contract as it is. I'm just looking at the rest of the AFC. A quarterback who did get paid, Trevor Lawrence. They're a team that the Chiefs have thankfully had their number. I remember when the Bengals beat the Chiefs 3 times in the same calendar year. I hated hearing about that, but the Chiefs just did that to the Jags. Playoffs, regular season playoffs, I think, or it was something like that. It was 3 times in the same calendar year, or 3 times in a 365-day period. What are your thoughts on the Jags and how they're looking? Are they another playoff contender this year, in your opinion?
I'm a little out on the Jags. Okay. I think there'll be a divisional round loss max. And the only reason I say that is because I don't like the supporting cast Trevor has around him. I am a big fan of Brian Thomas Jr., and I hope that he I hope that he becomes a perennial 1,000-yard guy, but I don't think Christian Kirk is the best option. Evan Ingram, to me, is kind of just a volume pass catcher. Let's just throw it to him underneath and hope that he makes something. And there was a reason that he averaged only like 8.6 yards per catch last year, despite having 114 receptions for the Jags. And the Jags just frustrate me, to be honest, because they had back-to-back number one picks. They had a window with Trevor Lawrence, and to me, they failed. Their best moment was a collapse on the Chargers' part, and then the next week they lost an Arrowhead, and that is the only playoff appearance in 3 years. And they went from 8-3 to 9-8 this past year. Now, Jags fans, I will say that there's been a tremendous amount of drops from receivers from Trevor Lawrence, but that kind of goes back to the supporting cast and the help that he needs. I 100% agree with paying him. I mean, they had to, but the Jags frustrate me, and for this year specifically, I don't think they're going to make much noise.
Trevor Lawrence he seemed like off and on all season, was just kind of banged up here, banged up there. Another team whose quarterback early got very banged up and missed a lot of the season was the Colts. What are your thoughts on them? I feel like they could be a sneaky team in the AFC this year, especially if Richardson stays healthy.
Yeah, so I actually have the Colts team preview releasing on Saturday, July 13th is what it'll be. There's one or two players every year that I am willing to reasonably, bet on. And Anthony Richardson is one of them. And I think when you look at the situation with Jonathan Taylor, who should be healthy this year, a good receiving trio in Pittman, Downs, and Adonai Mitchell, an underrated tight end to me in Jelani Woods, and then a very good offensive line and a very good play caller in Shane Steichen, who, by the way, the Colts finished 10th in points per game last year with a backup quarterback, which I don't think it can be emphasized enough. As long as Anthony Richardson is not a flat-out draft bust, I can't imagine the Colts are going to be a problem for a long time. I mean, that situation is great for him. He is a once-in-a-generation type athlete at the quarterback position, and as long as he is not a complete bust, they're going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's a team I'm very curious to keep my eyes on. I just feel like they've got several weapons. And with Minshew, did pretty well. Now he's with the Raiders now. But I mean, if you're going to do that well with Minshew, I think AR is a step up, at least, if you're going to be conservative or generous to Minshew about it. So yeah, very intrigued to see them. And then another team I'm just kind of curious about because of their moves, and I don't know how the quarterback battle is even going to play out, but the Steelers. What do you think about the Steelers? I've seen a lot of people talk them up. I obviously like their head coach a lot, Tomlin. He hasn't had a losing season in a long time. I can't remember how many seasons. He's gone 500, which is a non-losing season. But some people are like, can he get the job done? What do you think about the Steelers this year as they've made all the moves that they've made?
The Steelers, they're a team that I want to be good in the worst way, and the fans in Western Pennsylvania, they deserve a good team, but it's so frustrating because I feel like they are like a slightly better version of the Saints, where they do just enough to not be like bad or to not, they're never going to be a 5-win team, they're not going to be a 4-13 team, but I mean, even if you're asking a Steelers fan, do you think game on the line, season on the line, are you going into Buffalo and beating Josh Allen? Are you going into Cincinnati and beating Joe Burrow? Which I know they did last year, but Joe Burrow wasn't playing. My point is, are you doing that in the postseason? And to me, I don't think they would. And the Russell Wilson signing, it's like, okay, great. We might win 9 games. Their schedule is actually really difficult this year. But even if we win 9 games, to me, it's kind of like, for what? Like, does it really matter? And I think it was back in 21, I think would have been the year when you guys lost to the Bengals in the AFC Championship game. I know you guys played the Steelers 1 year in the playoffs, and that game wasn't even close. And that's kind of what I mean whenever it's like, does it really matter what you guys do if you're not going to have, an actual quarterback? And I know they drafted Kenny in the first round, and obviously that didn't work out, but it's kind of like a little half effort. Okay, we tried. All right, we didn't get them. Good luck next year, guys. That's unfortunately how I feel about the Steelers.
On that note, do you feel the same way when you look at the Titans based on their quarterback situation and how things are looking over there, or are you a bit higher on them than maybe the Steelers?
The Titans, to me, with Will Levis, are a different situation, just because there were several times last year where Will Levis, Mahomes, it doesn't matter. He didn't stand a chance. And the offensive line play for the Titans last year was awful. And they addressed that this year. Number 7 overall pick, J.C. Latham, is going to be the left tackle. They also brought in Lloyd Cushenberry in free agency. And I think at minimum, now 3 of their 5 starting offensive linemen will be above average players, which is critical. And their receiving room outside of DeAndre Hopkins last year was highlighted by, this is off the top of my head, Chris Moore, Nick Westbrook-Akine, there's one more big, Treylon Burks, a former first-round pick. Yeah, he hasn't worked out. And Tajay Spears was like the 4th leading receiver as a 3rd-round rookie running back. And then tight end Chigakonkwo. And that's I don't know how many quarterbacks are succeeding in that situation. So for Tennessee, I think they're going to be a thorn in a lot of team sides this year. Their schedule isn't too bad. Wouldn't surprise me if they win 8 or 9 games, considering they won 6 last year. But serious threat, no, not this year. But I like what GM Rand Carthon is building in Nashville.
Speaking of teams that are building, we don't have to touch super in depth on the AFC West. I'm going to do that next week with Brandon Perna. But cool. What are your thoughts on, a team that, if I'm looking at the West, the Broncos, I don't know what to make of them right now. I don't know what to make of the Raiders right now. But the Chargers, I feel like if anybody's made moves this offseason that have at least been like, it would be them. I know it's probably a big ask this year for them to be a legitimate threat in the West, but what are your thoughts on them just with all the moves they've made and the head coch that they got?
Aren't you used to it? Do you not know by now that they're the offseason champs? Like, haven't you? You should know this. You should know this as a Chiefs fan. No, but in all honesty, so here's the deal. I like the moves they made. I'm not dumb enough to say like, all right, they're the champs now, like we have in years past, by the way. But the thing is the Chargers receiving room right now is bad. We're talking about Ladd McConkey as their number 1 receiver, or Quentin Johnson, hoping he develops. That's not good. Their tight end room is absolutely it's bad. It's led by Will Dissly, followed by Hayden Hurst. That's not a good room for anybody. So the thing is the Chargers, I think they made a lot of good moves this offseason. The right places or the right pieces for the future. Joe Alt, think he's going to be a great tackle. Ladd McConkey, great, good route runner. Lunch pail, first one and last one out type guy. Junior Colson, like him as a linebacker. But that's not going to, boost you from the number 5 pick to the number 27 pick in the first round next year in one offseason. So Chargers, they'll probably, I would imagine they get swept by the Chiefs this year, but they'll probably be a 6 to 8 win team would be my guess. Now, next year, I think would be when we can have an actual conversation after, a full year of the Jim Harbaugh experiment and then go from there. But for this year specifically, they're a rebuilding team. I
was definitely a little surprised when they got rid of both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. I thought one of them would for sure go, but when they both went, I was like, and then they drafted Ladd as I don't remember how many first round picks they had. I think Ladd was an early second, right? I believe. Yep. I know they got Alt at 7. I can't remember if the Chargers had another one. I don't think they did, but I was just a little surprised on how that panned out for them. But yeah, I feel like at least in the AFC West, if you're looking at the Chiefs chasing a three-peat, this is a good year because I think some of these teams are making moves, possibly not for this season. I don't feel like the Broncos made moves really for this season. Not the Raiders either with Minshew, but maybe in the future. If you have any other thoughts on the AFC West, would love to hear it. And then we'll transition to just, hey, in the scenario the Chiefs don't end up in the Super Bowl, I'm curious who maybe, we've kind of ranked them already, but who are 3 teams that you're like, if the Chiefs aren't there, I could see these 2 or 3 teams being there, representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. Yeah,
so the thing is for a team going for a three-peat, granted there hasn't been many in NFL history, or going for three-peats because there's obviously never been a three-peat, but
yes.
I don't know if you're ever going to have the stars align better than what the Chiefs have this year from a division standpoint because you're catching everybody at the right time. So I think there's a very real chance, and obviously, Mahomes is a competitor. You know how personal he takes things. I would be pretty surprised if the Chiefs don't win at least 5 division games this year. And when you head into a season thinking that you can go 5-1 in the division at minimum, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they go 6-0, by the way. It's just pretty difficult to go 6-0 in the division. But
yeah,
when your expectations are 5-1 at minimum, and that's a good idea to show where you are. But if the Chiefs don't go to the Super Bowl this year, Man, if I had to pick a singular team right now, it's not going to be anybody from the West. The thing is the South. The South, I wouldn't say the Jags or Titans. And as much as I want to believe in the Colts, I'm not going to predict that. I'm not, laying everything I have on the line for that, for a guy that's thrown 84 career passes. And the Texans maybe, but if the Chiefs don't go this year, honestly, I think it would be the Bengals. But the thing is when you have a conversation, there's so many teams that you can make cases for, whether it's because of the defense, whether it's because of whatever. I mean, the Browns defense is going to be a nightmare to play against. And as long as Deshaun Watson can be serviceable, that's probably going to be a 9 or 10 win team. And then when you get to the playoffs, that defense is nobody's going to want to play them. So there's several teams you can make a case for. If I had to say one, though, I think it would be Cincinnati if the Chiefs don't go.
Well, I appreciate your honest answer. I hope out of every AFC team, it is not the Bengals. I enjoy trolling around with them. They're very competitive. Their fan base is fiery. But I do enjoy hanging the old 0 rings over their head. So please let it be a different team. Although I respect a lot of their players. I think Jamar Chase is one of the best receivers in the entire NFL, even though he basically hates the Chiefs. It's probably a little bit of a shtick for him at this point. But I like Burrow a lot too, not when we play against him. I think he's very good when healthy, one of the more upper elite QBs in the NFL. Like if you're going to have or Mahomes QB1 in the tier of his own, I mean, a healthy Burrow's got to be right up there. With all that being said, it sounds like you have the Chiefs as favorites for the AFC to represent in the Super Bowl. But am I wrong in that assessment based on what you've said today?
No, you're not wrong. And we're entering the season with a 2-time defending champion team that improved. And that can't be emphasized enough. And what also can't be emphasized enough is how much at times the Chiefs offense struggled in the 2023 season that they're going to learn from. And really everyone's just going to be, kind of just carnage in their path this year. I mean, they're a much improved team from last year. And for the rest of the NFL, that's a very scary thought.
I always enjoy just hearing people that aren't Chiefs homers and that just are in the NFL space, and you do this for a living. Like, I just enjoy hearing that because when I say it, or if that's my opinion, I'm just a Chiefs homer. So I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I do think you said something earlier, like the stars, I mean, they can't align much better for the Chiefs in their chase to the three-peat with how the division is shaping up, the AFC West. And then, they've got some opponents. I mean, they've got threats that, could potentially knock them out. That's probably the craziest thing about the playoffs. It's single round elimination. You never really know. But when the game's on the line, I get it. I'm a Chiefs fan, born and raised, but I am probably not betting against Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Chris Jones. I mean, I don't know that I'm betting against that team when the game's on the line. And it seems like a lot of people are seeing it that way as well. Now, how will it truly play out? That's the beauty of the football season. We will see. And I think the biggest thing for me is if the Chiefs stay healthy, I don't know who's stopping them probably at the end of the day. With that being, I think one of the biggest underrated things about the Chiefs too, somehow, year in and year out, all these deep playoff runs, they're pretty healthy. Like heading up all the way into the Super Bowl, I understand Mahomes dealt with the ankle a couple of years ago, but outside of that, they've been pretty blessed in that area.
Yeah, I'll put it like this, as a Vikings fan, that, the best 6 years of quarterback play of my life has been highlighted by Kirk Cousins, which, by the way, Kirk he's a good quarterback. But as cliche as this sounds, I cannot imagine waking up every day and knowing that I have Patrick Mahomes as my quarterback for the next 10, 15 years. And it's just like what do you even do? And that's what, for a Chiefs fan, I would absolutely be talking. I'd be running my mouth all the time. If I could say, we're 3-time champs, and then I'd be chirping Bengals fans all the time, especially when Burrowhead was, when they tried to make it all that. But I mean, to wake up and have Mahomes as your quarterback and everything, it's like, what do you even do? And it's a good position to be in. I envy the position you're in. I'll say that.
Hey man, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff, seen a lot of insane losses. The Chiefs' playoff losses through the years have been some of the most heartbreaking, depressing losses you could ever imagine. Mariota throwing his own touchdown pass, the 3 missed field goals in the 90s by he who shall not be named. Offsides by D Ford. There's a bunch of them. So it's definitely a sweet time to be a Chiefs fan. Last question before I let you out of here. I know you got to get going, but let's say the Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl. I know this isn't about the NFC, but who are maybe 2-3 teams you're like, if they're going to make it to the Super Bowl, here's who they're most likely playing from the NFC.
So I'm not going to say chalk and say, 49ers, because they've been in the NFC Championship game and for the past 5 years, including 2 Super Bowls. But honestly, my pick right now, I tweeted it in May, and if they get there, I will absolutely be reposting it. They are my pick heading into the year. It is the Detroit Lions. The Lions remind me a lot of the Chiefs in the sense of they were a very, very good team last year, and they improved their roster a lot this offseason. They were a little weak on the interior part of their defensive line from a pressure standpoint. The Lions' run defense last year was phenomenal, but they added DJ Reader this offseason. I know he's coming off a torn quad and all that, but hopefully he, with medicine where it is today, hopefully he's fine. But they also had problems in their secondary. So Brad Holmes naturally drafted corners with the first 2 picks that he had, which also included trading up directly in front of a division rival Packers, who also needed a corner. So they are a very well-run organization, and they would be my pick. If I didn't have to say the Lions, or if I didn't choose the Lions, I really think Philly's going to be back. Their coordinators last year were not good, and we saw the decline or the collapse, if you will, but I think they're going to be fine with Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio as their coordinators.
Would you put the 49ers up there maybe after that? I just still feel like they're such a good team.
Oh, sorry. I would personally right now, I'd go Lions 1, 49ers 2, Eagles 3. Sorry, I didn't talk about the 49ers just because, everybody knows about them and, yeah.
I will say this, if the Chiefs make it back to the Super Bowl and it's the Niners again, people are going to be pissed they're just tired of seeing the same 2 teams in the big game. So I'll be curious to see. I like the Lions. If the Chiefs for some reason don't make it and the Lions do, I might buy a Lions jersey just for that night. I don't think they've ever been, right? Are they one of the few teams that have never been? I know they've never won. Yeah, so that would be such an incredible thing for their organization. Who, as a Chiefs fan, sure, the Chiefs went to Super Bowl 1, won 4, but in my whole lifetime until Super Bowl 54, I didn't see them win anything. So I could picture myself as a Lions fan when I was a Chiefs fan back in 2019. So, well, thanks so much, Garrett, for your time. I do want to encourage people, if you want more just sound football takes. If you didn't hear it by this point in the 40-minute interview we did, this guy knows his ball and he's a lot of fun to follow. I come at it from a fan perspective and try my best to communicate as I'm able, but it's people like you that I like to, if I'm going to go for more solid, just in-depth knowledge, you are definitely one of the channels that I'm going to go to. And I know you've got a bunch of content coming out. What's things looking like for you for the next couple weeks? You finishing up just covering every team and their offseason moves?
Absolutely. It is team previews from here until honestly about when you guys play the Ravens in week 1 of Thursday night. That's all it's going to be. We're not at the West yet. Right now we're covering both Souths. We're getting the Souths out of the way. And then we're going to move to the Norths, and then we're going to go from there. So the NFC North is up next. I'm working on the AFC South right now. Like I said, Colts video will be out soon, and then the Texans after that. But then we're going to move to the NFC North and the AFC North, and eventually the East and the West.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm looking forward to the content, especially when you cover the West. I'll be curious to kind of see your thoughts and overview there. But thanks so much for your time, man. I think maybe in the future when you cover the West, I might hop on there and talk a little Chiefs. But I appreciate your time. I know You're busy. You got a bunch of content you're making, a life to live. So thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule.
Of course. Appreciate you having me, Cole.